of our webinars. They make this possible for us because without that, we wouldn't be able to bring in speakers and facilitate this. And this is just another quick lunch. I call them lunch power hours, where, hopefully you can tune in and gain some insight and be connected with some members who have some really valuable resources. So big thank you to Sexton. And then next up, I'm going to quickly introduce OrderEase, and this webinar is going to be a little different from the other ones. It's going to be more Q&A, more open-ended, a little more interactive, so mentally prepare yourself. And I have some questions for the end as well. And with us, we have Paul and Kyle. And so OrderEase actually joined our membership, and actually it was started by a gentleman who actually owned a Rona as a dealer and was experiencing a lot of issues with his tech, with his systems in terms of ordering and dealing with multiple manufacturers. And then he actually created this company as a solution to the problems he was facing, which is a really cool story. So you guys they're kind of a startup, but at the same time, very much not, because I know Paul, like, he's worked for a bunch of the tech companies in the industry as well. Kyle, I don't know your whole history, unfortunately.
It's okay.
But if you're hanging out with the other two, I know you're pretty cool. And so I've had the privilege of actually doing a couple roundtables and having lots of conversations with these guys, and they're a wealth of knowledge. And so really today's webinar is on the role of technology in increasing revenue. So it's a tie into how can you save time, energy, money, and how do you just make your user experience just better for the end user as well. And so they're going to go through some case studies and stuff like that today, which probably resonate with a lot of the businesses that are on this call too. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Kyle and Paul, and we can take it from there, okay?
Perfect. Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate your time and the introduction. So yeah, today's presentation is really around ROI. So we've had the last few webinars talking about different things, and we really want to tie it back to ROI being increased sales, increased profit, potentially it's time savings and that kind of thing. So I personally have worked with a couple different point of sale companies within the space, within the LBM space in North America. I've had a lot of conversations with dealers over the years on what they expect from their vendors, how a vendor can be easier to do business with, and how they can create some more automation to provide them the details and feedback that they're looking for. Kyle.
So my name's Kyle. I've been with OrderEase for about just over 10 years. I've actually had some experience on both sides, but my big focus is on the vendor side. So working with the hardware, the lumber, lawn and garden, building material suppliers on all the topics we've been discussing. But in prior lives, I've sat on the retail side as a category manager. So I've gone through the challenges of having multiple portals or manual processes. So yeah, very excited to be sitting here and talking with you folks.
Perfect. So today we want to kind of make this as collaborative as possible. So we're going to walk through some scenarios, case studies, if you will, on different things that order management can really tie back to ROI. Whether it's through increased sales, whether it's through time savings, potentially increased profit. And then what we want to do is kind of tie it or push it back over to the audience to try and get some feedback and some collaborative discussion to learn, what you guys think, or if there's anything you want to challenge, we're happy to open up that discussion. So if I look at my first scenario, everyone's been at the booth at a trade show, dealer walks up, whether it's a luxury item, potentially a commodity item, walks up to the booth. They love what they see. They're ready to write an order. They're ready to place an order. Some of the, bannered shows, they can place an order using the banner technology, but a lot of the association shows and other shows, most people will take a business card. If they don't have the tools to be able to write up an order right then and there, they'll take a business card, they'll write it down on an Excel sheet, they'll take notes, they'll potentially, have hand notes, whatever. And then a week later, a couple days later, a few weeks later, they'll start to do their follow-ups. You'll follow up with the customers. And at that time, a lot of times when we talk to vendors that we work with, they might have a 50% return rate because the novelty is worn off and they weren't able to strike when the iron's hot. So if you have tools that allow you to manage taking that order right there at the show and have everything, push right back through to your computer system, it does increase sales and make these shows a lot more profitable. Kyle, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, like I've been to so many myself, and of course worked alongside vendors at the shows and have coordinated with, in discussing different trade show events historically or where they want to be in the future. And you think of even scenarios like, the booth lineup, where again, if you have only a select few reps there and you're doing manual processes, it's taking you an extra amount of time to write those orders. How many of those people that were sort of floating around the booth suddenly start trickling away because they're not getting the attention, or they feel like, they've waited so long and they just kind of move on. So, having the right tools to kind of, expedite the process of, talking to an account, getting a show order committed while the iron's hot, like Paul was saying, and then maybe not losing the opportunities of the foot traffic is super important. And, especially during booking season, because these aren't, a couple $100 orders at times. Sometimes these are, tens of thousands, if not more, depending on what space you're in. And if you lost 5, 10, 20 people just floating the booth and leaving, who knows how much revenue that could have been. And yeah, it could be some serious lost opportunities if you don't have the right tools and the right connections, just to efficiently work these shows. So quick example.
Perfect. Does anyone have any questions on that scenario or comments?
I have a question just because, we put on a trade show, for instance, which many people have attended, whether you're a dealer on the call. Dealers might be there and they probably do their own contractor shows and stuff like this too. So I see two sides of the coin here. What would you just quickly, like off the cuff, like what would be your recommendation for these teams that are dealing with this stuff? So yeah, there's the Excel spreadsheet. So what is the tool that you guys have that would assist with this? And then, like how do we get the process started in terms of what do we need to do? Like, so I'm a marketer, I'm working a trade show. So even for us, let's say we work trade shows too, with buying group shows and stuff like that too, and we're talking to dealers. How do I start this process? And we're a small company. How do we scale this? Like what am I looking at cost wise and stuff like that too? That was like 20 questions in one.
No, it's all good.
Yeah.
One comment that I could definitely say is just start evaluating the time spent. Time is usually money. You only have so much time. You can't get it back. Is it a little bit of a painful process? Like even writing a simple order, is it taking you 10, 15 minutes to gather the details, find the SKUs, educate, and just start evaluating, what is the time spent? Because that's usually a big catalyst in making some of these decisions. Is lost time, could be lost revenue, but it's also the post-show stuff. If you're handwriting these orders and it takes you a week to get them back to the office, and then it takes them 2 weeks to enter the orders, it's just a lot of redundant work. So it's just trying to think of that process like, hey, we made the sale, it's fantastic, everyone's excited, but there's so much that comes along after the fact that either eats into that sale or could affect that sale in terms of the accuracy, especially if it's handwritten comments that are deciphered between multiple hands as it passes through. So it's just high level, just looking at what your show experience is, what it currently kind of looks like, and is there an exorbitant amount of time spent between the writing, handing it over, re-entering, and is there any discrepancy sort of in accuracy as you kind of go through that process? It's kind of just, I think, a very easy way to kind of just start thinking about it without committing too far going down one path. Would be off the cuff one thing I would think of.
Well, and the tools are available for different sizes of organizations. So we work with sales agents that might represent a few different brands and are not that large at all, maybe 1 million or so in revenue. And then we work with companies that are hundreds of millions. And the tools kind of, scale with the organization. So the tools themselves are available to pretty much anyone within that delta.
Okay, I love it. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll talk about a second scenario. So the order that gets retyped, a little bit like what Kyle was saying, but this one, a lot of dealers will send in a PO via PDF from their point of sale system. So that order comes in, and in most cases, somebody has to take 5, 10, 15 minutes to re-enter that order. You always run the risk of human error. Does it get entered properly? Does the price get entered properly? Does the quantities exist to actually fill the order? All these different types of validations. Well, for approximately $1 per order, if you look at the ROI, you cannot throw manpower at one order to represent $1 for 10 to 15 minutes of manpower. These types of tools in a fully automated solution can definitely provide significant ROI for a very simple type of process. The other thing that we have, the luxury of our industry, specifically in Canada in the LBM industry, there's only a handful of point of sale systems that dominate the industry. So by the time you map one of those point of sale systems, you're spanning across multiple banners, multiple regions, all your pricing, all that accuracy can be placed, and attached to these different customers across these point of sale systems. And the real key is getting it back into your ERP system or your computer system with a clean order. The prices are accurate, the quantities are accurate, the products are accurate to what the ERP or the computer system states in your system. So that's what a true automated solution can look like. And there's very, real ROI in that type of a solution. So Kyle, what's your insight on this?
Well, I'll be honest, especially in the last couple of years, this is the most common situation that suppliers are reaching out to me for, because for lack of better terminology, you're kind of at the mercy of a dealer or a dealer network if they say, hey, we can't use a portal or use certain tools that maybe you've provided. We're mandated to follow a very strict process, kind of like EDI in a lot of ways, where you're at the mercy of your larger trading partners or whatever their processes are that you have to accommodate. So everyone's excited. You get a new banner account. Again, maybe that transitions to a handful of PDFs that month. I've had situations where it's translated to 900 in a single month from a new account that's been landed because the dealers are sending them in directly, pulled from the point of sale. So 1,000 dealers across Canada, all mandated. They're all using basically the same one or two point of sales. And, you imagine 900 orders on an order management team, and they've got other banners as well. So it's just finding the right tools, not only just to capture the order in an automated way and deliver it where it has to go. There's also the discrepancies on those orders. Like, what if a dealer is running off of 2025 pricing because they haven't updated their systems to your 2026 as an example? So like Paul said, if there's not even just a point-to-point solution to say, grab the data and dump it, it might not move you as far ahead as you hope. Whereas if you have a tool also that can do a little bit of validation on inbound orders like PDF or inbound Excel, at least it can provide a layer of accuracy or notify you that there's a discrepancy before it even touches the ERP. And it could be something as simple as, hey, I got to reach out to this dealer and make sure that they've got their most recent price loaded, especially if they're going by their systems methodologies versus ours. So very common. And it's honestly just a massive time suck, because at the end of the day, just one of my final comments here is somebody's filled this order in already and spent the 10 to 15 minutes on one side of this of the space, members and suppliers or dealers and suppliers. Someone's already taken the time to do this, and then basically as they're emailing it, you got to get to it, you've got to decipher it, you've got to make sure it's accurate, you've got to now spend another 10 to 15 minutes to key it in, and there's now a bigger discrepancy on typing in 100 versus 1,000, or I put 10 in, or the price is wrong, or whatever the variables can be. So it's a big pain point, but there are a lot of great tools out there that can totally streamline this. And like Paul said, for a buck, if not less, as you scale, it's a big ROI indicator, especially the time saved on these.
Yeah, and AI's lent itself to some additional functionality. So things like being able to just put an email together and say, I want 10 of ABC 123. and 30 of XYZ 456. All of that can also be mapped directly back in. So it's definitely evolved in the last several, year even, from where it was. So it can definitely be strong ROI.
I'll have one last little comment just on that as well, is that, and I'm sure there's many suppliers on this call, and ones that I've just dealt with for so many years, that they may not even be sending you your product information, like your codes or your descriptors and things of that nature. So you even think of receiving 10 different PDFs from 10 different accounts, and they're going by their SKU nomenclature and going by their descriptors, or full, or they're calling it a little bit different. And if you're training a new staff member or of someone there that has 50 iterations of not even your information, but they're deciphering theirs, having some good SKU cross mapping methodologies or automations are super handy, so that a dealer can speak their language, but as things come to you, it translates. It's like, I'm speaking French and English. You're both speaking the same thing, but there needs to be a layer in between that just kind of translates it. And that way you're not spending all that extra time making assumptions on codes and things of that nature. So I just wanted to say that as well, because that's a huge situation that I've seen so many times.
So
Yeah, it's a
how
great point, Kyle. Sorry.
Yeah, so no, I didn't mean to interrupt Paul, but quick question, like how does a business diagnose this as a problem? Like I can imagine like these businesses are massive. Like I know we have All Fab on, not to pick on All Fab, and I'm not saying that they have a problem, but that's a massive company and a massive organization, for instance, and they have multiple business lines and different units, and I'm sure that it's a very complicated system. How do they start diagnosing? Like how would a company like that diagnose where they need assist and where are they kind of so-called bleeding? Again, I don't, it's not them as an
I have
example. I just named them.
Yeah, I have two probably metrics that are right off the cuff that I know, and one we've talked about. One is time. Time is money. You can always make the dollar back. You can't get those hours back at the end of the day. So it's just measuring the time spent. And if you're saying I pay my staff $25 an hour and they're spending 10 to 15 minutes on an order, and you just start doing some very simple calculations, and you might be surprised just on the dollars that you're spending on the redundant work, because frankly, it's redundant work. It's not growth oriented work. Growth oriented work is you allocating those dollars to a new partner manager, to the next channel you're getting into, to your next sales rep, into your next agency you're hiring, your next territory, your next distribution center. That's where the dollars need to go. And then the other key metric is your error rate. That's a little bit tougher to find out, but there is ways to do it. Is just to see, like, if you're looking at, I do X orders per month, taking me this long per order. There's my time spent on the orders being rekeyed in. How many of those actually have discrepancies? Are we something as low as 3%, but 3% on hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars? That's not a small it's not small. So it's usually just those two metrics. It's time and error rates, and those would be really key sort of red flags. And you can even start looking at different channels. Maybe you're drop shipping, or you have I'm assuming most, if not all, suppliers are more B2B focused, but you think of someone omni-channel. If you're drop shipping or Shopify is running seamlessly in your B2B side, or working with your distribution partners, is where those error rates just skyrocket. Well, you've got a very specific vertical on a very specific customer type that might follow a unique process, because those orders are entered maybe a little differently than your consumer or other order types. And you can start really focusing on, that's my starting point. So you don't have to look and say, I'm going to fix everything all at once. And I joke about this in a lot of my discovery calls that I facilitate, is people come to me with like 50 problems. I'm like, we're going to look at this like a doctor. Your arm's broken and your leg's sore. We're fixing the arm. We're going to talk about the leg. But we're going to really focus on that one key channel, the main problem, that specific error rate. And then if we correct it, then that can have a trickle effect down to all the other channels. So with a bit of a longer answer, those are the two key things you're going to want to look at: time spent and error rates. And if both are sort of adding up and not looking good, that's where you're going to want to focus on that specific, on that particular channel more immediately.
Well, and one of the other things that does take time is, if you do have inaccuracy in the data that's coming in, it turns into a lot of back and forth between the dealer and the vendor to get that order accurate. So those minutes all start to add up as well.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. So if we look at scenario number 3, the portal that handles the easy orders. So a lot of suppliers have invested money in building out their own portal, whether it's done through Shopify, whether it's done through Magento, whether it's done through custom. Um, a lot of investment goes into these, but technically at the end of the day, most of these portals were designed to be a business to consumer e-commerce solution. So they don't necessarily handle the complexity of the B2B world. And so these are the things you have to look at. If you're looking at a basic everyday order, you could pretty much use anything from an e-commerce standpoint for that type of scenario. But orders that move throughout the year, things like seasonal bookings. Seasonal bookings could be trade show bookings, could be season, from this date to this date, this is the pricing. Could be different rules, like, you have to buy a truckload to get this seasonal booking, half truckload, all these different permutations have to be able to handle through a portal to gain full automation. Same thing with things like promo pricing. Marketers get very creative on how they can drive more sales, whether it's